So if you have a $250,000 mortgage with a monthly payment of $1,200, over the life of that mortgage, you would pay in total $432,011.92. But what if there was a better way? What if you could pay your mortgage every single month and set aside less than $50,000 to do it? In fact, you could technically do it for less than... What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Average Joe Investor channel. So we're not playing around here. We know that mortgages are expensive, especially now with higher interest rates. If you happen to get a $250,000 mortgage maybe a few years ago and your monthly payment, principal and interest, is $1,200, like I said, you'd pay over $432,000 in total with all of your monthly payments. That's a whole lot more than the $250,000 that you borrowed. In this video, we're going to explore 5 different methods and a total of 7 different investments that could potentially pay your mortgage for a fraction, a very small fraction, of what you would pay if you paid it every single month. The concept we're talking about here is setting aside enough capital so that that asset then generates income on a monthly basis to pay your mortgage for you, so you don't have to pay for it every single month. First investment we'll look at here is one that I'm sure everybody has heard of. It's the gold standard for dividend ETFs, and that is SCHD, the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF. It's got a lot of great quality companies in there that raise their dividend every single year. Now, what would it look like? How much capital would we have to set aside in order to get enough income from this investment to pay our mortgage, which we're assuming is $1,200 every single month? Well, we can do the math. We go down to distributions here. If you were to add up all of these distributions right here over the past 1 year, which is quarterly distributions, the total will be $2.9319 per share. $1,200 is the monthly payment. Remember, with the mortgage, so $1,200 times 12 equals $14,400 every single year in mortgage payments. Take that amount, divide it by the amount per share, which is 2.9319. That means we need 4,119 shares of SCHD right now in order to get enough on an annual basis to pay that mortgage. You take 4,119 shares, multiplied by the current price of SCHD, $84.65 per share. That means total capital you would need to lay out today, $348,715.68. Now, that doesn't sound like very much of a deal, right? That's a lot of money to have right now. Ain't nobody got that much capital that they can set aside to pay their mortgage. You're better off just paying the $1,200 every single month. So SCHD is out. Next ETF we're going to look at here is one that I'm sure everybody here has known about. It's the original covered call high yield income ETF, and that is from Global X QYLD, the NASDAQ 100 covered call ETF. This one pays a monthly distribution. That's better than SCHD already, which only pays quarterly. And if we were to look at all of the distributions here, if we were to add up the most recent 12 months of distributions, that would be 2.1684 in distributions per share annually. We take $14,400 annual mortgage payments divided by 2.1684, which would mean we'd have to have 6,640 shares of QYLD to get that much on a monthly basis. We then take 6,640 and then multiply that by the current price per share of QYLD, which is right here, approximately $18.08 per share, which would equate to total capital to lay out today, $119,652.80. That's a whole lot better than SCHD. Going back over here to the mortgage payments, would I trade the idea of $432,000 here for a total of $119,652? Absolutely. Problem is, who's got $119,000 laying around for them to pay their mortgage? Nobody. So while QYLD is a lot more affordable and would do the job based on the metrics we talked about, probably not a viable option because no one's got $119,000 laying around. Next, let's talk about a relatively new ETF, one that has been right around only a year old. It's got a massive distribution rate, and that would be from Defiance ETFs, ticker symbol QQQY, the NASDAQ 100 Enhanced Options and Zero DTE Income ETF. You can already see here it's got a massive distribution rate at 65.47%, and they make their distributions now on a weekly basis. It used to be monthly. Now it's weekly. They write daily put options on the NASDAQ 100. They actually only hold cash. They don't actually hold any underlying investments aside from cash. So let's take a look at the historical distributions for QQQY, which we can see right here. If we look at all of the distributions for the past 12 months and add them up, the total distributions would be 13.5944 per share annually. $13.59 per share, which is significant. $14,400 in mortgage payments divided by that distribution per share would be 1,060 shares of QQQY, which would be needed, assuming that the distribution amount stays stable moving forward. We take 1,060 shares multiplied by the price per share of QQQY, which would be $34.47, which would mean the amount of capital we would need right now would be $36,538. Now, that's a whole lot better than QYLD. We went from $348,000 for SCHD down to $119 for QYLD. Now we're down to $36,538. Now, we're kind of met with the same problem though, because still, a lot of people don't have $36,000 lying around. But if you had that money in a savings account, that could potentially pay your mortgage. And I know that everybody would trade $432,000 in total payments for $36,538. And we can make that trade because even though the total amount of payments is still $432,000, we are only contributing from our assets $36,538. Now, investment number 4 we're going to talk about here is one that's definitely very controversial, got a massive distribution rate, and you either love them or you hate them, it seems like, based on the comments in the YouTube channel, and that would be the YieldMax ETF portfolio. All the different YieldMax ETFs that are based on single stocks that have massive distribution rates. Now, instead of looking at individual ETFs here for YieldMax, what I decided to do is go over to my portfolio, which I have on a separate video. I talked about how I was utilizing a YieldMax portfolio to pay my bills. And here in this test, I had set aside $3,000 in capital to make a $185 monthly payment for myself. And we're still testing that, so that's a whole separate issue. But I'm going to go off of this portfolio, this ETF portfolio, which includes TSLY, Ulti, Coney, NVIDIA, Misty, AMDY, MRNY. And I'm going to assume right here that this amount, the estimated annual income here of $2,559.18, is based on $3,000. I'm just going to extrapolate that out to $1,200 per month. So we're just going to pull out our handy dandy calculator here. What we're going to do is we're going to take $14,400 annual mortgage payments. We're going to divide that by 2,559.18. This estimated annual income down here based on the portfolio. That equals 5.6268. That's the factor we then are going to take, and then we're going to multiply that by the amount of capital necessary down here. So we're going to take 5.6268, multiply that by $3,000. Total capital necessary here, if you can believe it, is an astounding $16,880 necessary. Now, I would assume with this type of portfolio, I'd want to give a little bit of a pad because YieldMax is known for having varying amounts of monthly payments. So I would certainly set aside more like $20,000 here, or maybe even more, to make sure that if the distribution goes down over time, that I would still have enough capital to make that monthly payment. Now, the last method we're going to talk about here would require a little bit more work than the other we talked about, because all the ones we've talked about so far is just hold the investment, collect the monthly or quarterly distribution, and then apply that towards our mortgage payment. Here, this takes a little bit more effort, but I think the reward is significant. What we're talking about here is running the wheel strategy, or a high-frequency wheel strategy, with 3 index ETFs, specifically QQQ, SPY, and IWM. You could choose any of those 3 investments. So we're selling covered calls and cash secured puts. That's the wheel strategy. You have to own 100 shares of the underlying investment to sell covered calls, or you have to have enough capital on hand to purchase 100 shares if you're selling cash secured puts. So with IWM, you can see here the price per share is $217.43 right here. So if you have 100 shares, it would be $21,743 necessary. So then what we're going to do is we're going to sell options. So let's go ahead and go to the option chain for IWM. And we're going to be selling options either on a daily or a weekly basis, just so that you could do either one and still be successful. So as a quick reminder, if our mortgage payment is $1,200, take that number, we multiply it by 12, and then divide by 52 to figure out how much we would need per week, which would be $276.92. So if we're looking at the option chain here, let's assume we'll just look at covered calls. We would look at the weekly option frequency. So right here, if we're looking at the money price, we'd be ultra aggressive in this situation. We could collect about $257 right here for a 7-day covered call contract on IWM. So you own the shares and you sell covered calls on a weekly basis, you probably would collect about $260, which is just a little bit short here from what we would see with the amount necessary on a weekly basis. So that kind of falls a little bit short. But if we were to do it instead, based on a daily basis, okay? daily options, and if we're looking at it from that perspective, we take $1,200, we would divide it by, on average, 21 trading days per month. 1,200 divided by 21 equals essentially $58 every single day would be necessary. And if we go in here, we'll look at the daily. At the money contract would be $76 to $79 here, approximately. And that you can tell right now, right off the bat, if you can collect anywhere above $57, $58 per day, which you clearly can based on these numbers, that's going to be more than sufficient income coming from options in order to pay our monthly mortgage payment. Now in this situation, IWM or the Russell 2000 is the least amount of capital required because it only requires about $22,000, though you probably want to have a little bit of a buffer in that account in case over time you have a little bit of capital erosion as a result of selling at the money options. I'd probably go with $27,000, $28,000 in capital. But the benefit here is that you have a little bit more control, a little bit more discretion on how you write these options, and you're likely to get more capital preservation in this method than you would get with YieldMax, which I would assume is going to have some erosion of that capital over time. Could be significant, but then again, if it results in our monthly mortgage being paid for us, I think that's a risk we're willing to take. Now, instead of IWM, we could go with QQQ. QQQ requires more capital. That's the NASDAQ 100 ETF. The price here is $482.10 per share, which would require about, if you take $42.10 times 100 shares, that would equal $48,210. So a little bit more capital involved here, but what you do is you get a lot more flexibility, and the amount of capital erosion you experience here is much lower because you can go further away from the money and still collect a good premium. What do I mean by that? Let's go ahead and look down here. We'll look at the 7-day option first. Remember, we need $277 essentially per week. And if you look here, you can go, right here, the at the money price would be $509 per week right here for QQQ, which means you could go all the way down here to $488, which is $6 out of the money, and still collect enough premium on a weekly basis in order to actually make our monthly mortgage payment. And here it means we're getting capital appreciation as well as option premium, which means you're likely to have more capital preservation with this strategy than if you did it with IWM or any of the other ETFs. Now, if you wanted to go on a daily basis, you could go even more out of the money. Let me show you that here. The October 8th expiration, remember we need $57 per day. Right here would be the at the money, $483, but you could come all the way down here to $46 on a daily basis and still collect enough premium in order to actually pay our monthly mortgage payment, and we'll have that extra buffer with capital appreciation as well. As you can see here, there are a lot of different ways to pay your mortgage for you, and by setting aside a little bit of capital now and having that capital pay our mortgage for us, that results in a whole lot less capital that we have to then pay to have our mortgage paid over the next 30 years. Truly, a whole lot less capital is required with these different strategies. If you want to learn more about selling options or how to use income in your portfolio to pay your bills, to structure a retirement strategy, make sure to check out the Average Joe Investor Patreon community, and specifically the Discord chat, because you get access to tons of DIY income investors in that community that are doing this on a daily or weekly basis. You can also get access to me one-on-one to talk exclusively about ways to structure your own account and to just learn more about the mechanics of selling options, covered calls, cash secured puts, etc. If you want to learn more, check out the link down in the description below. Make sure to leave your 2 cents down in the comments below. It's my goal to respond to as many of these comments as possible on the day I post a new video. That's all I got for you guys. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching.